when you look at big data roadmap, you still have to address the typical thing that you address in enterprise architecture, and I just draw this real fast. Typically in enterprise architecture framework, such as Zachman, TOGAF, and the likes, will have things that will talk about business architecture, business processes. They will have something that talk about data information. They will have something that talk about application. They may or may not talk about services. I have a tendency to put both. They will talk about the techno side of things. If they think about it more, they will have to address the integration of all of this, providing a layer that allow that to happen, and there are many patterns of integration. They will do the security. They will address security. And they need to consider a few things. What's called influencing factors. There are internal factors, what the management believes, for example, and external factors, for example, regulation. Those affect whatever you're doing in the architecture. In addition, you have the governance aspect that you need to consider what you enforce in the company, who does what, why, and so on. But all of that is very nice, but while you're doing all of that, is typically there is a business motivation behind it, and there are a business motivation model that has been published that can be used to anchor the enterprise architecture. And I like to add my business intelligence background into these things, and this is not the standard, but I like to add business dimension because business dimensions allow us to qualify. So I could use these to qualify the KPI that are used to monitor business process, for example. The dimension are part of data architecture as well when you do look at the business intelligence world. But what I like the most is that I can use products, channels, geography, and any other dimensions to qualify the scope of whatever target architecture and roadmap I'm doing. So if I have what are the companies here? What are the channels? What are the products? I qualify with a unique set of values, and you don't have to chase. And usually, consultants, employees, they are always confused with these type of things. So this is a good reuse in the data here, and reuse to qualify everything. The other thing to consider is that people will do roadmaps, right? But when you look at roadmaps of people, they typically do application roadmap. Application 1 and 2 is replaced by application 3. Roadmaps is for everything. I could have roadmaps for this process needs to be replaced by another process. This process is missing, so I put roadmap process. Process to works, they need data, right? Process will take input data, will produce value-added output data. You can do typical things. You can do CRUD, they create, read, update, delete data. For example, you can sidepod this from a Six Sigma, for example, supplier information, process output, and customer. So that's the type of thing that you can do interaction. The application could offer services. Services are based on database most of the time, right? So there is also a link there. And all that resides on techno. And usually techno, I usually do these two first, and then I map with the application. If you start from scratch, that's a good way to do. Because you need to know what's the data you're supposed to work with. You need to know the processes, and then you need to do your application target architecture, what you need to be implemented. So for sure now, people are, in theory, I can go, if I take the frameworks model in the telecom, I can go and buy about 40 applications, all available on the web, and I would have an NGOS compliant telecommunication architecture. Not all industries are set like that, but that's an example of taking business data and having, this is the cut of the optimized sets of application to support these two. So this should be the resulting. In real life, architecture is the result of what people have been doing over and over, and it's not always optimum, obviously. So that's why we have current situation, target architecture, and a roadmap is all you get there. And it's not always linear. Sometimes you have to do things, throw away and all that, so you need to judge what's required. Techno, well, it needs to ride on something. Could be on the cloud, could be internal. So this is what I call enterprise architecture. So I have a 2 days class just to explain that, so that's not the topic today. I'm trying to relate enterprise architecture roadmaps with big data roadmaps. So the point here is that the statement is big data roadmaps is exactly the same thing as what people have been doing in enterprise architecture. It has to cover business process, data, application, technology, integration, security, etc., including governance, actually. When we do the data collection here, we have a governance framework for ensuring that we have the proper way to collect data. But just to give an example, on the technology side regarding big data, I would have to think about some sort of Hadoop cluster, the technology to support the Hadoop cluster. It's a bunch of nodes, so I need to choose which vendor I'm going to take. I need to know the number of nodes I need to take. I need to understand how it grows. This also will make me think also about even the distribution, what's riding to support the Hadoop ecosystem. Am I going to take it from MapR? Am I going to take it from Cloudera, Hortonworks, IBM, and so on? So those are, there is a distribution to choose. Then I may decide to go hybrid. Many companies are hybrid, meaning that they have an Hadoop cluster, but they also have databases. Standard databases, columnar databases, or all in Hadoop, because you can also have databases totally covered by Hadoop. MapRDB, for example, is an example of a columnar database into that distribution. Network, you will have to think about network. If you're having 1 gig instead of 10 gigabit per second, you may have problems to move all this data, and you may even want to have more than 10 gigabit per second. You need to think about replication. For many reasons. I mean, things can fall down. I mean, I know people will say replication is something you have in Hadoop. You can do double, triple replication, whatever. But if you're using databases, you need to have a replication strategy on top of that. So this is why I put it there. You need to think about load balancing. We do at YellowPages something that not everyone do. We do customer-facing big data with sub-second response time. So the load balancing is very important. So we cannot have people waiting. So there is a strategy there, and the strategy depends on what type of technology you have. Are you splitting the query and reassembling the query? Are you having brute force, one node doing one query, and therefore when you're busy, use the other node? There is, I'm not talking exclusively Hadoop when I talk about that one. High availability, that goes without saying if you're customer facing. Performance, same thing, and scalability. Scalability, so many of these points are addressed with Hadoop per se, but they are not all addressed, and when you're having hybrid, you better revise all of that. So that was just to say, if I roadmap on the technology side with big data, I didn't talk about data scientists and things like that here. I just need to find what's my technical architecture, how am I going to engineer this thing to support the job of a data scientist, for example. Now, in terms of data, what am I going to add there? I'm going to care about data collection, right? I mean, we need to, you heard about all these devices, you're collecting data from device, I need to collect data from mobile device, from a website, and so on. Data governance, I mean, you need to have data governance to look at data, to provide guidance, to do quality. I think I put quality here, data quality. Data, you need to do data architecture. Right now, the architecture supports slowly changing dimension type 1, but later I want slowly changing dimension type 2 to provide historical context to my big data. So I like to merge BI thinking with big data thinking and having the best of both. And I don't like the BI analogy with this is going back in time, looking in the mirror, while big data is about going forward in the future. I think we need both, and I think you can use the dimension of BI in the big data world. That's what I like to do. You need to describe what's the state of data. Is the data updated? What's the refresh rate there? What's the state of data? You may have supplier of data that didn't supply the data. You know, this is a production consideration, but that's important. Aggregate strategy. Right now, I can say we have only 3 aggregates. We go full blast, it's all atomic, except three aggregates, and they are small. So the interesting part here is that we go through billions of rows and we still have a sub-second response time. So that's something, and if you start to build an aggregate, aggregates after aggregates, you're eating in your ETL window, because it's not true that everything is real time. You're waiting for a source of data coming from all over the place. Data cluster strategy. For people used to conventional databases, you're thinking index and so on, and some people may know the DBA will know about a cluster index. This is similar. We are using Hadoop to recluster all our data, so it's stored physically all together to optimize response time. So we have a columnar database, and we also use Hadoop for that. And then there is RDD. This is in the Spark worlds, the views, dim queue, and so on. There are other elements to consider to add aggregates on the fly, discard aggregates, and so on. So this is data, right? So the architecture side, all you implement data. So I can again roadmap. This is what I have right now. I want to have that in the future. Application, I don't even have to explain, because most people within enterprise architecture do that. So application X and Y is replaced by this one. Application A will communicate with application B. So this is the conventional stuff. Process-wise, it's a bit tougher, because process you need to cover on because it's very data. It's called big data. It's not called big process. So it's very light. People don't talk much about processes, but whatever application and people and data, there is some process around it using it. So this was my way of saying that big data roadmap is not different from enterprise architecture. You just need to know the specifics of big data. Big data is about the capability to deal with large volumes, the 3 Vs, the 10 Vs, depending who you're reading, velocity, variety, volume. But at the end, it's today we are able to use open source capabilities that allows you to go through a lot of data that we were not able to do before, and then to apply maths essentially to a series of algorithms to do what we were calling 20 years ago data mining. Now it's called machine learning, forecasting, there's all kinds of names. Actually, that's the confusing part. But it revolves about applying mathematics to data, essentially. So this was about enterprise architecture and big data. On the topic of agile versus architecture, I said that we, instead of saying waterfall versus agile, my recommendation is keep doing architecture. We have enterprise architect, we have solution architect. The reason why you need these people is that they need to focus on the big thing so that you can establish the roadmap. Based on what we were talking in the prior part, you establish the roadmap, and then you ask your solution architect to cut solution at various point in time. And it's detailed architecture when you're at the solution level. Now, you can have a person that's dedicated to do the solution architecture while you have your development team in a complete agile mode. That's what we do here. So the danger of doing only agile is that you don't even know where you're going. You're just flexible in addressing new requirement, but you don't necessarily know where you're going, and I think it's very dangerous. So we try to have a foot in both worlds. So we define these roadmap, we define these targets, we know where we want to go, and this is again from data, process, application, technology, and so on. So we do that, but then we adopt a full agile mode, meaning that we do the Scrum, we do for example the sprint demo. Our sprint are 2 weeks. The only thing we do is we are in an iterative mode from the angle that the QA is not included. In a 2-week sprint, it's very aggressive to have the QA included. So we have like an extra cycle after the sprint. So essentially, that means that we have a monthly release. So this is the way we do here in my group. It doesn't mean that everybody at YellowPages do it the same way. But this group, which is about analytics, right? Big data analytics, consumer, advertiser analytics, that's what we do. It doesn't mean that we only do development, so it depends which products. When we consider it's a competitive, it's a weapon, from a competition viewpoint. We invest more money, we build something that is totally tailored. When we consider we need intelligence about it, but we don't need to have something that is superior, then we use what's available on the cloud, for example, or any application provider. That's kind of what we do here for the agile versus architecture.